Tonight, arrests in 2 cities in a nationwide terror investigation. We'll have the latest on the evidence and what it may mean. I'm Russ Mitchell. Also tonight, will President Obama's media blitz to push his health care agenda wear out his welcome with viewers? A concert in Havana attracts hundreds of thousands of fans while sparking protests in the United States.
By getting to the top of the tallest mountain out there, they have to look at me a little bit differently.
And a peak performance. He is paralyzed from the waist down, but determined to conquer Africa's legendary Mount Kilimanjaro.
This is the CBS Evening News with Russ Mitchell.
And good evening. We begin this Sunday with a terror investigation that spans more than half the country and which took a dramatic turn late last night. Here's the latest. 3 men have been arrested, 2 near Denver, 1 in New York City. All 3 face arraignment in federal court tomorrow on non-terrorism charges. However, a federal affidavit says the arrests are in connection with a plot to detonate improvised explosive devices inside the United States. The arrests come just days before world leaders are scheduled to meet in New York at the UN. Don Teague in Denver begins our coverage.
After 28 hours of questioning by FBI officials and repeated denials to reporters that he has any ties to terrorism.
Of course not. I have nothing to do with Al-Qaeda.
Najibullah Zazi, an airport shuttle bus driver, was arrested at his suburban Denver apartment Saturday night. The 24-year-old had been cooperating with investigators, but was arrested after he abruptly called off a 4th day of questioning. He and his father, who was also arrested, are both charged with making false statements to the FBI. According to court documents, Zazi traveled to Pakistan last August, staying until January of this year, and admitted to attending bomb-making courses at an al-Qaeda training facility. Officials also allege he emailed handwritten bomb-making notes to himself using multiple accounts.
Sorry, no comment.
Allegations Zazi denied to authorities.
I think this demonstrates again, despite what some analysts have said, that the safe haven in Pakistan and the al-Qaeda core still matter.
At the mosque Zazi attends in Aurora, Colorado, employees are expressing concern about the investigation.
We are not terrorists. That's not our purpose here. Our purpose is to bring peace.
According to court documents, Zazi's arrest is part of a larger investigation into several individuals relating to a plot to detonate improvised explosive devices in the U.S. Affidavits also show authorities have kept a close eye on Zazi. Agents tapped his phones and kept him under surveillance earlier this month on a 30-hour drive from Colorado to New York City. Authorities stopped Zazi twice during that drive, once near Kansas and once again at the George Washington Bridge entering New York City. On September 11th, authorities searched his rental car parked in front of this apartment building in Queens. They removed his laptop, discovering the bomb-making notes and emails.
If convicted of lying to the FBI, Zazi could face up to 8 years in federal prison. On Monday, he and his father will appear in court here in Denver for the first time. Don Teague, CBS News, Denver.
The 3rd arrest took place some 1,600 miles to the east in New York City, and it too involved the charge of making false statements to government agents. Hari Srinivasan is in the borough of Queens this evening with that part of the story.
This is the New York City apartment building of 37-year-old Ahmad Wais Afzali, who was arrested Saturday night in connection with the possible terrorist bomb plot. To his friends, it came as a surprise.
Yeah, he just called me last night, 9:09.
Mohammed Haji was planning to go to a mosque with Afzali on Sunday to celebrate the end of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan.
He's a good person, that's all I can tell you.
And for years, Afzali has also been an NYPD source.
He is a funeral director in Queens. He is born in Afghanistan.
Authorities say that he lied about phone calls to the lead suspect, Najibullah Zazi, and his father. The criminal complaint says Afzali made materially false, fictitious, and fraudulent statements. In a wiretapped conversation, Afzali told Zazi that the NYPD had come around with pictures looking for information on him. That was September 10th. Just 1 week later, authorities say Afzali lied about passing on that information. The question is, where does the investigation go next?
Are there more arrests? Do they find, the explosives?
Mike Balboni used to be Homeland Security advisor to the governor of New York.
There's always a tension between wanting to go in and arrest somebody and bring something down versus wanting to wait, let it unfold a little more, perhaps get other individuals.
Before his arrest, Afzali told WCBS TV that he felt betrayed by the police. He said, "It's funny how for years they came to me, used to come to our house and drink tea, and then they're going to set you up like this."
I think my client was arrested because the government and the FBI is embarrassed. This is a guy who's doing his best to help.
His lawyer says Afzali is a respected member of the community with no criminal record. Hari Srinivasan, CBS News, New York.
To help us put these latest developments in context, we are joined in Washington by our Justice and Homeland Security correspondent, Bob Orr. Bob, good evening.
Good evening, Russ.
After talking to your sources all day, what do you think? How big a deal is this?
It's really hard to know how big it could be, but I can tell you this. Federal officials believe that Najibullah Zazi is the real deal. That is, that he was committed to doing something somewhere using homemade explosives. Unlike some of the other plots, the so-called plots we've seen since 9/11, this one has a nexus, a direct connection to international terrorists. For example, federal agents know that Zazi traveled to Pakistan. He's admitted meeting with bomb makers and al-Qaeda know-how people in Pakistan. And then when he came back here, he maintained contacts and reached out to others. So using that information, federal officials say it is not a stretch at all to believe that he was very serious about making these bombs and setting them off.
At this point, do we know why the feds decided to move in now?
Well, we can guess that a couple of things. Number one, Zazi was tipped off to police and FBI surveillance. One of the people in New York, in fact, the man in Queens who's been detained, according to charging documents, told Zazi and Zazi's father that the FBI and the police had been around showing his picture. So he got spooked. But beyond that, there was a lack of bigger knowledge. That is, they didn't have the great outlines of an overall plot, and they didn't know what they didn't know, so they wanted to move. There were a lot of high-profile events in New York. It was the 9/11 anniversary, you remember. The president was in town, the U.S. Open was going on, and of course the UN meeting was coming up. So the police got a little nervous, saying, we know this guy's up to something, we don't know what it is. And then when he was tipped off and fled, they had to move in.
Bob, are there more arrests to come?
I think there's no doubt about it. These charges so far are not terror charges. They're just charges used to detain the men. Lying to federal officers is a serious accusation, and it could bring 8 years in jail. But now that Zazi's safely in custody, you can bet the FBI will continue to press him, and we're told they are looking at a number of other people in New York, also overseas, and perhaps other places in the U.S. So I think it's no doubt that other arrests will follow.
Bob Orr in Washington, thank you very much.
Thanks, Russ.
And it's still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News. President Obama's Sunday morning TV marathon. Will it help his cause or hurt? The worlds of politics and TV have never seen anything like it. A president granting 5 talk show interviews on a single Sunday morning. President Obama was all over the dial today, and not surprisingly, reviews are mixed on how effective his media blitz was. Kimberly Dozier in Washington has the roundup.
Flip the channel this Sunday morning, and this is what you'd see. All President Obama, just about all the time, with one exception.
The only place you won't see Barack Obama making yet another pitch for health care.
There were 5 interviews originally intended to focus on pushing health care reform. The president, at least for one morning, dominating the debate. But topics range from the economy.
My critics say everything's a tax increase.
To swine flu.
The high-risk populations are going to be first with the vaccine.
To the investigation of torture by the CIA.
Nobody's above the law.
And whether he'll send more troops to Afghanistan.
Whatever decisions I make are going to be based first on a strategy to keep us safe, then we'll figure out how to resource it.
He was also asked if he agreed with President Jimmy Carter, who blamed race for much of the tone of the health care debate.
What I'm saying is this debate that's taking place is not about race, it's about people being worried about how our government should operate.
The White House believes the president is their best salesman, but critics are using the O word, as in overexposed.
When the president becomes video wallpaper, when he's always on all the channels, people naturally tend to tune out.
Others argue that the media market is now so fractured, this is how you reach America.
In truth, lots of people are only seeing him once, and those are the people he's trying to reach.
He's got an hour of media exposure yet to come on David Letterman tomorrow night, though that less news-centered format has its risks. After his appearance on Jay Leno last March, one throwaway line dominated the headlines.
This is like Special Olympics or something.
There were no such misfires this morning. By day's end, Mr. Obama had reached an estimated audience of just under 10 million. The public's response is yet to come. Russ?
Kimberly Dozier at the White House. Thanks. New York newspapers reported today that in an unusual move, President Obama has urged New York's Democratic Governor, David Paterson, not to run for re-election next year. But Paterson said he has no intention of dropping out. Paterson has low approval ratings, and Mr. Obama is said to fear he could be a drag on other Democratic candidates. Still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News. Is radio the key to winning the hearts and minds of Afghan women? 3 more American troops lost their lives this weekend in Afghanistan. Their deaths raised the U.S. toll to at least 211 so far this year, the deadliest of the war. U.S. forces in Afghanistan are waging a new kind of battle in their campaign to win hearts and minds. You might call it the radio wars, as we hear from Mandy Clark in eastern Afghanistan.
Running a radio station wouldn't normally be considered a dangerous job, but for Shahid Dab Hamdar, it could cost him his life. The Taliban want to kill me for what I do, he says. The Taliban are angry because Radio Kalagush broadcasts programs on women's issues and education in this remote eastern province of Afghanistan. That's a challenge to the Taliban's conservative ideology. Question and Answers is the most popular show. It's an educational trivia contest for both boys and girls, an idea unthinkable to the Taliban, who oppose girls' education. In this remote part of Afghanistan, where literacy is less than 20%, radio is the best way to reach the people. The U.S. funds the station and helps build the audience by handing out radios. They've given out hundreds so far.
We were in a village this morning, and that's all they wanted was more radios.
Village women who don't want to show their faces say they like the women's show the most. They want a segment on basic first aid and childcare. But this is a battle of the airwaves. This villager is listening to a Taliban radio station. They have sprung up around the country, threatening to kill those who cooperate with international forces. The Taliban messages are intimidating and dangerous, he says. They encourage the young to join the Taliban and kill people. U.S. forces admit that people could use their new radios to tune into the Taliban, but say given the choice, Afghans want positive information.
A lot of the messages that we put out are specifically to help the people. For example, drinking clean water, how to take care of your child. I mean, those are really productive messages versus, hate and discontent messages that we generally hear from the Taliban.
Hamdar is hoping to expand the reach of the station. Knowledge, he says, is the best weapon against the darkness. Mandy Clark, CBS News, Kalagush, Afghanistan.
Just ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, a Latin American rock star plays Havana and provokes controversy in Miami. Havana was rocking today as hundreds of thousands of Cubans cheered one of Latin America's biggest music stars. But across the Florida Straits, some Cuban Americans were not so thrilled. Kelly Cobiella has more.
It was a remarkable sight. Over 500,000 people crowded into Havana's Revolutionary Square, not for a political rally, but a rock concert by Colombian sensation Juanes. The 17-time Grammy winner dubbed the show Peace Without Borders, to share music with ordinary Cubans without the politics.
Through music, the art, we can change many things.
For Miami's anti-Castro hardliners, the concert was seen as an endorsement of the Castro regime. After the event was announced last month, a small group smashed the singer's CDs in protest.
What hurts us Cubans is that Juanes, a person who is so famous, Juanes is going to sing on the side of the communists.
In recent weeks, police were sent to Juanes' home in Key Biscayne, Florida, after threats were made on the internet. Yet some in Miami's Cuban exile community see progress.
This concert means a first step in the right direction to open up bridges.
Juanes says he understands the pain of people whose families were hurt by the Castro regime.
We respect that pain, but we're trying to look into the future. If nothing happened, then, we lost. But we want to try something different, just to make sure that at least we tried.
Something different has already happened. For the first time, the audience wasn't handpicked by the government. The concert was open to all Cubans. The result was the biggest crowd for an event featuring someone not named Castro since Pope John Paul's historic visit in 1998, and the biggest rock concert ever in Revolutionary Square. Kelly Kobiella, CBS News, Miami.
Next up on tonight's CBS Evening News, can Mount Kilimanjaro be climbed in a wheelchair? He's about to try. And finally this evening, the moment of truth is almost at hand for a man who is no stranger to the toughest of challenges. In just a few days, he'll be climbing Africa's Mount Kilimanjaro as no one has ever climbed it before. Karen Brown has his story.
Don't tell Chris Waddell he can't climb a mountain.
When I get there, I want them to go, wow, I never thought that was possible.
This week, Waddell will try to become the first paraplegic to summit Mount Kilimanjaro on his own power. Paralyzed at 20 in a freak ski accident, Waddell went on to become one of the most decorated para-Olympians ever. But still, he's tired of just being a guy in a wheelchair.
How in the world can somebody like you feel invisible?
It's really easy to dismiss somebody, to look at somebody and dismiss them just completely. And so by getting to the top of the tallest mountain out there, they have to look at me a little bit differently.
At 19,340 feet, Kilimanjaro is the tallest peak in Africa. It's a so-called walkable mountain. But when you're paralyzed from the waist down, it's all about your arms and your will.
The physical part is exhausting, but the mental part is a whole lot more exhausting when you think, okay, well, I've got to go from here to there. And you're thinking in 5-foot increments? You want to ascend a 19,000-foot mountain in 5-foot increments?
After a scouting trip to Africa last year, he plans on doing it just like any other climber. 5 days up, 2 days down with his highly engineered four-wheel mountain bike.
Mars rover married to arm pedal power.
His legs are tucked underneath him.
It allows me to steer just by going left and right.
And he steers with his chest, choosing his route like a rock climber.
And I'll go 5 feet, and it'll be like I just ran a 400-meter sprint.
On the final push to the summit, on an incline similar to this, Chris Waddell will have to climb 4,000 vertical feet. To make that happen, he'll be secured to a winch and he'll have to pedal himself up a rope. The fixed rope through a converted sailing winch will give him traction.
The only thing you can think about at that point is just one revolution and then stop and catch your breath.
In a project 2 years in the making, financed by grants and donations, Waddell assembled an extraordinary team in Crested Butte, Colorado.
You'll come from your crank.
To help him train and refine his now near indestructible bike. An off-road race car designer built the frame. An engineer and triathlete refined the gears and added wheels 4 times as big as his old ones, all under the guidance of expedition leader Dave Penny.
I don't know as I've ever seen an athlete dig so deep and go so hard. If Chris can do this, he's setting a new standard for anyone in a wheelchair.
While in Africa, his foundation, One Revolution, will provide wheelchairs to Tanzanians like Emmanuel.
The only way to say thank you for the opportunities that you have is to give somebody else an opportunity. I see myself in a lot of these kids.
He wants the world to see them too.
When you get to the top of that mountain, what are you screaming to the world?
I'm asking the world to see other people like me.
And to envision the possibilities rather than the limitations. Karen Brown, CBS News, Crested Butte, Colorado.
And we will keep you posted on Chris Waddell's climb during the weekends to come. And that is the CBS Evening News, later on CBS 60 Minutes. Thanks for joining us this Sunday evening. I'm Russ Mitchell, CBS News in New York. Katie will be here tomorrow, and I'll see you again first thing in the morning on The Early Show. Good night.